recording. All right, so hello and welcome to our panel on doing a postdoc hosted by the Engineering Biology Research Consortium Student and Postdoc Association. I'm Ross, a postdoc in Peter Zanch's lab at the University of British Columbia, and I'll be your host for today. We're going to have 20 to 30 minutes for audience questions at the end of this, followed by a casual social where there'll be time to chat with each other and our panelists in breakout rooms. But before we get started on the Q&A, I'm going to let each of our panelists that are here today introduce themselves. We have 5 that are currently here, including myself, and then hopefully Yishao will be able to join us soon. So why don't we get started introducing ourselves from left to right here, and Kat, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Kat Majors. I am a postdoc at Northwestern in Keith Tayo's group. I did my PhD at Rice University. I graduated in 2019, and I did not do anything synthetic biology or engineering biology related for my PhD. So I had a pretty big switch for my postdoc. And also there's a dog named Winston behind me, just so he doesn't distract you. He is there. He will probably stay the whole time.
Hi, my name is Ilene. I am a postdoc here at Oak Ridge National Lab. I work in the with Kerry Eckert, and I have been here for 2 years. I did my PhD at Rice University as well in the Systems Synthetic and Physical Biology program with Job Silver and Kerry Marciello as my PIs. Nice to meet you all.
Hi, everyone. My name is Alan. I'm a postdoc at MIT with Greg Stephanopoulos. I guess we have a big Rice group here. I also got my PhD from Rice with Ramon Gonzalez. Since I just started like a month ago, I hope I can answer some of the questions on application processes and how to find postdoc.
My name is Heidi Klumpa. I'm a postdoc co-advised by Mo Khalil and Mary Dunlop at Boston University. I'm about 2 years in. I did my PhD not at Rice. I was at Caltech working for Michael Elowitz, doing like systems and synthetic biology. But some of my big transition was moving from mammalian cells into yeast.
Thanks, everyone. And I'll say I did my PhD at MIT with Ron Weiss and Domitilla Devecchio in synthetic biology, and now I work in Peter Zanch's group doing more T-cell therapy and stem cell derived differentiation towards T-cells. So sort of a shift towards stem cell engineering and developmental immunology. Okay, so we'll stop the screen share here so that we can have more of a nice little panel look to the Zoom. And just go ahead and get started with asking each of our panelists what they were looking for when they started a postdoc. Why did you do a postdoc? And feel free to just chime in at any time.
Since I guess I'm the newest here, I can start. So I've been interested in going into academia, and I've been basically doing pretty narrow area of research during my PhD. So I wanted to expand that and try find research area that's a little different from what I did for PhD, but unfortunately, not many labs were interested in hiring me with, I guess, specific PhD research area. So I ended up basically going into very similar research topic. But I realized that even under similar area or similar community, there are a lot of things that are different. So I'm basically starting to learning a lot of different things. So it was, even though the ultimate goal is pretty similar, I am basically learning a lot of new things, and hopefully that can build my, career applications for future academic job applications.
I can say I started my postdoc. I also have known for a long time I wanted to stay in academia, and I had a really clear vision of how I wanted to translate what I did as a PhD student, which was not synthetic biology related. It was all about medical diagnostics and clinical translation of those. and how I wanted to kind of fold in some protein engineering type new assays to try to get better point of care tests. And I knew I didn't have the skill set to do that. And so it was really important for me to do a postdoc where I could kind of get those skills and build them together into what would be a hopefully unique research direction for a future lab.
Now, I similarly am interested in staying in academia and running my own group. And it seems like a postdoc is kind of an important experience to have. Just a chance also to like, not only explore a new research direction, but also kind of, I felt like there were things I learned about how to do scientific projects that I didn't really get to implement. So again, just like a second chance at like having your own ideas, testing things out, mentoring more people, maybe getting more teaching experience, grant writing experience, like maybe stuff that you don't really get to do in grad school. One other interesting thing is I also applied for jobs in industry at the same time. And I was sort of surprised that the kinds of jobs people thought I would want were not the jobs that I wanted. And just specifically, I worked with like a liquid handling robot. So a lot of people were like, oh, so you want to come join our automation division? But that's not what I wanted to do. So my other thought was like, you know, if academia doesn't work out or I change my mind, I was hoping that I could have a postdoc that would sort of give me skills for the industry job maybe that I wanted. So I was also interested in getting sort of like more computational experience just as a way to transition.
So I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do after I finished my PhD. I knew that I really like research in general, but I wasn't all sold out on the teaching aspect of going into academia. And then I also graduated in the middle of the pandemic. So I originally thought, okay, I'm gonna try sort of like industry or something like that. But then there was like this big freezing hire, so there were not open positions when I graduated. So I was looking for an alternative that wasn't going to go and do a postdoc at an academic, at a university. So then I decided to try out the national labs. So I had the opportunity to work in some government-funded projects when I was during my PhD. I was working with DOE and I was working with DARPA, and I thought that I kind of like that concept of more milestone-driven, like very big team kind of like research. So I decided to go and try to do my postdoc at a national lab.
Cool, thanks. Can I ask a quick follow-up question, Elena, on the national lab? So a lot of us are in more academic positions at universities, and there were several questions from people that registered on the differences between sort of a national lab experience and an academic lab. And I was wondering if you could comment sort of on what your experience has been in a national lab versus an academic lab.
Yeah, I think that at least my experience here has been that you get a little less flexibility, I guess, on the type of project that you are going to be working as a postdoc. Usually they hire you for like a big project and they want one particular task to be completed, and that's going to be kind of like your postdoc project. They tend to be very limited in time, so you cannot be a postdoc 4 or 5 years. Usually there is a 3-year limit, and it's a very a strict limit, and then you have to either apply for one of the positions at the national lab or find a position somewhere else. Again, I think the science in general is a little bit more milestone driven. So there are different, Department of Energy missions, and there are different tasks that you have to be completing. It's usually like a big interdisciplinary way of writing as well. So it's very different writing grants. And it's kind of like a different process to what you will do in academia, or if you were applying to a fellowship as a postdoctoral scholar.
Great, thanks. And for national labs, there's also a difference in some of the permanent positions that exist, right? Could you talk a little bit about those too?
Yeah, absolutely. So as a postdoc here at the National Lab, I mean, there are 4 things that you can do just as in academia. You can either go and apply to an academic PI position at a university. You can also go to industry. Usually you have a lot of, collaborations with industry and things like that. So you get to network quite a bit on that aspect. So it's quite useful. I mean, most of the postdocs that I know, I have actually gone to industry after that. But there are also 2 other routes that you can go. So first of all, you can become something that it's called a technical professional. It's not a technician, it's just that you have a permanent position here at the National Lab doing research, like basically working at the bench, but you have your own independent projects and you are supporting basically the research staff and the postdocs. So that's one route that you can take. Alternatively, you can become an RD staff scientist or a research staff scientist, which will be the equivalent of a PI. So you are mostly, writing grants and getting funding. You have the postdocs and you have your lab. You don't work that much in the bench after the first couple of years. And in terms of how different that position as a PI is compared with academia, is just that you have you don't have a teaching requirement. So most PIs here at the National Lab, they usually have a joint appointment with some university. For example, I am at Oak Ridge National Lab and the closest university is University of Tennessee. So most of the research staff scientists here in the biological division have a joint appointment in the biosciences division department at the UT. So that way they usually do like one class, one seminar class or something like that, and then they are able to also get graduate students. But the ratio between graduate students and postdocs here at the National Lab is very different to in an academic setting, right? They are usually per lab 1 or 2 graduate students at most, and the rest of the team is usually composed of postdocs and technical professionals.
Awesome. Thank you for the detailed description. That's great. So if there's any more questions about National Lab specific things, we can handle those later in the Q&A, or you can ask Elena yourself when we have our breakout session, networking, social. Okay, so for me, just quickly, I was looking for sort of starting to translate my work from sort of synthetic biology towards cell therapies and thinking about a good place I could go for that would set me up either for academia or industry. And so my current lab is one that kind of has good sort of options for going to both routes from here, I guess, if that makes sense. Okay, so now I'll ask the rest of the panel what they were looking for in their supervisor or the group that they joined, and how did they reach out to their supervisor? So for example, for me, I actually knew somebody that was previously in the lab that I'm in now. And so I sort of just emailed the professor and mentioned that, and then asked that person to also email the professor to sort of give a little double notice, I guess, of my intention or my interest in the lab. So what about you guys?
So I basically started conversation through conferences. So I've talked to at least four or five professors from conferences, and usually a lot of them are actively looking for postdocs. But I guess I kind of started looking too early. I started looking about more than a year before I finished my PhD, and a lot of them are looking for postdocs that can work right away or within a few months. So a lot of people that I talked initially didn't really pan out, but a lot of them I talked toward the end of my PhD really panned out, and naturally went into like an informal Zoom interview followed by on-site. And I was mainly looking for, since I'm interested in academia, sorry, one of my advisors' guidance was go into an established lab, like a big name PI, because that is what's really important for getting an academic job in the US, at least that's what I've heard. But at the same time, I was looking for projects that looks interesting. So I'm mostly interested in like sustainability and energy using biology. So I was specifically looking for people who do work in that area. And based on that criteria, I've talked to like 4 or 5 people and kind of narrowed down from there. And some of them, as I mentioned, did not reply to my email. And those are people that I haven't really interacted other than sending an email. So you should, I think conference is definitely a good way to kind of get to know the person, see in person and kind of have that conversation. And usually a lot of established professors have room for new postdocs. So I think that worked really well for me.
I'll echo the using conferences to try to find a network and build it out. I'll also like further build on that and say small conferences, like don't go to like AICAG and think you're gonna like meet your future postdoc advisor. There's just too many people there. Like try to go to smaller conferences where there's a lot more time to like talk to people, know people, and really kind of build a relationship with someone. So when you do email them, it works out well. That's not how I got my postdoc. I totally just cold emailed people and asked them if I could like have Zoom meetings with them. I did not say I'm asking for a postdoc. I said I'm interested in your research. I'd love to start a conversation. And I had pretty good success with people getting back to me and saying they were willing to do that. For me, since I was switching fields, I had kind of 2 potential routes I was willing to take. I either wanted to be in a really big lab, similar to what Alan was saying, like really well established, have a really big name kind of behind me, building me up. Or I wanted the exact opposite, where I could be in a smaller lab, but where a professor could really invest in me and teach me a lot of the skills that you need to be a faculty that we don't necessarily learn when you're just working at a bench all the time, because pretty soon, if you're going to be a faculty, you're not going to be at a bench anymore. And so I ended up kind of going with a smaller lab with a PI where I know I was going to have more like one-on-one FaceTime with him. And I think that that worked out really, really well. I've had a lot of time getting to mentor other students, being taught in how to do grantsmanship, manuscript preparation, all of those types of things, having a lot of one-on-one FaceTime with my PI and really him equipping me to go onto the faculty market, which I did last year. And I felt very prepared to do it with him and did find some success, which was exciting too. So yeah, I think you can go either way. You don't have to have a big name behind you to get a faculty position. I think it helps, but it's not like the kiss of death if you don't have that.
Yeah, I think for some advice I got was maybe also like thinking of papers that I wished I had written as a way to sort of get a sense of like both labs I would like working for, but maybe also like a sense of like the type of question that excites them. Some good advice I also got, which I don't know how relevant it is, but I was really worried about maybe switching fields and like the person would want to hire someone who had expertise. And one of my committee members said, well, if they're just hiring you for your skills, they might just be hiring you for your hands and not for your brain. So like someone who's excited about you sort of like independent of the skill set you bring and is excited to train you, that might get like a different type of experience. I mean, there's not always like flexibility, but I thought that was nice. So yeah, maybe feel free to, yeah, like maybe you don't have to be limited by the skill set you already have. I was trying to think. I mean, the other thing was just I really wanted the person to be kind, because in my PhD, when there were hard times, I really admired my advisor, and that made it easier to go the extra mile for him, or like just to like put in the extra time. And so I wanted to have that kind of experience again. Other stuff that I kind of talked about in interviews when I was chatting with them was like, would I be able to get teaching experience? Would we do grant writing? And something else I tried to ask about was like, what's the funding situation look like? Like, am I going to have to leave in 2 years? So just sort of explicitly ask like how kind of precarious is the situation. And luckily the people that I talked to said like, oh, like you'd be fine. Like we'd like you to apply for fellowships because it's good for you and good for us, but it's not necessary. And yeah, I guess, and then similarly, I like Kat, I just sort of cold emailed some people that I had met at conferences, but a lot of them I just had seen give seminars. I usually attached my CV, and I think in the beginning I sort of like really agonized over like, I'm gonna have this like little paragraph summary of me, and then I'm gonna have like a little paragraph summary of what I see myself doing in their lab. But I feel like they don't spend a lot of time on the email, like reading it. So then towards the end, I think I applied to 5, but towards the end, I was just sort of like vaguely like, I did self-signaling, and I think that intersects with what you work with in this way, but like, let's chat on Zoom. So I think email also doesn't have to be perfect as long as you can sort of suggest that there's like some overlap, because again, like these emails are short and might get lost.
So I had the opportunity during grad school to go to a lot of different conferences. And again, I participated in projects that were government funded. So I was kind of aware of several different national labs and their groups there. But to be quite honest, I have never heard of Oak Ridge National Lab before. So I collaborated with people at PNNL, Berkeley National Lab, Livermore National Lab, but I never heard of Oak Ridge National Lab. So I literally just saw the position posted in LinkedIn, and I didn't know anybody here. And I decided to apply mostly for personal reasons at the beginning, just because I liked the location, it was close to my family. And then I heard back from them, and I realized that they were starting like a new synthetic, not starting, but they were expanding their synthetic biology division here. I spoke with my current PI, and I really liked the projects. She really was really good at framing the different skills that would acquire during this PhD, and I saw opportunity for growth in this division. So that's why I ultimately decided to come here.
Great, thanks everyone. There were a lot of questions in the registration form about building skill sets for industry in a postdoc, and I was wondering if people could comment on that. I have one thing to say on it, perhaps before we get started with your guys' comments, which is that I think that if you want to use a postdoc specifically to get to industry, you're going to have to think very carefully about how you do this, because you might think that you don't have the perfect matching skill set for, let's say, some job applications that you see posted by companies, but it's not necessary to know every little thing that's in the job application. If you match a good fraction of the skills, then you're going to be pretty strongly considered. And so don't think that you need to know how to do every little technique to get an industry job. But if you're looking to sort of pivot your field, or just the kind of like, get into a different area for what you do in industry, then I think that a postdoc can be valuable. But if you want to sort of do something pretty close to what you were doing in grad school or adjacent to it, there might be reasons not to do it, including the like opportunity cost financially and otherwise in sort of accelerating your career in industry. If you do 3 to 4 years in a postdoc, you're sort of putting yourself out 3 to 4 years of development in industry, and that in industry experience is quite valued because there's a lot of different kinds of skills besides the technical ones that you'll learn in an industry setting. And so I think that there's some nuance here in whether a postdoc is good before industry or not. I've seen a lot of people, for example, in my former lab, come in from outside of synthetic biology, learn about the skills and approaches of synthetic biology, and then be able to leverage that into a good postdoc for themselves. And so, this can certainly be a good route. But if the other panelists here have comments on what they think about the industry side of this, be great to hear what you guys have to say.
As someone who doesn't want to do industry, I do know people, there are industry postdocs, and I'm a little sad. I think the last panelist was someone who was a postdoc in industry, if they join us. But there are opportunities to do postdocs within industry where you're still able to kind of, because where it puts you behind is every industry has like your salary is typically based on how long you've been there a lot of times. So if you start later, like you're behind on that kind of salary pay grade ladder. And so if you start as a postdoc, that kind of gets you in that door earlier. You're still technically a trainee, so maybe slightly lower bar to entry, so you're into the company. If you're going to do a postdoc in academia and try to leverage it into an industry position, I would definitely recommend not trying to, like, I've been a postdoc for a really long time at this point, like you don't want to do that. You want to do like a 1-issue postdoc, get whatever skills you need and leverage them into that position. Because again, the later you start, the further behind you are kind of on that ladder of growing in the company. You also get like stock options that like get better with time. So you want to get in there sooner. I will say that most, especially like large academic institutions, do have a lot of resources for going into industry. So most of the postdocs I know here at Northwestern, most of them are interested in going into industry eventually. And so they're using a lot of the resources through the Postdoc Association or the Office of Postdoctoral Affairs to try to like get those skills to help them do, you know, interviewing, negotiation, all of those skills that we might not necessarily learn as a PhD student. So there are those opportunities similar to what you have as a PhD student. You still have access to them as a postdoc.
Yep. Oh,
No, please.
sorry,
go
I was
ahead.
just going to add, I think I did like an internship at EBRC, which is a metabolic engineering company while I was in grad school. And I think one of the things they emphasized to me for their interview process was, I guess your ability to like work on a team and sort of like also to kind of like showcase different types of soft skills. So I think something I talked about was like anytime I'd like organized or like led something, like I helped my lab put together our monthly DARPA reports, which seemed like something kind of relevant to industry, and then also like communication type things. So I'd been involved with like science communication or like teaching assistant stuff. So I guess I feel like there are ways to sort of, yeah, I guess like take up leadership positions or run teams that you can highlight.
And I think that this goes to something in industry, which is that there's a couple routes still. There's more of the scientist route where you're going to be more in the lab and have technicians and sort of like earlier career scientists working with you. And then more of the managerial route where you're going to can potentially be going to become like a scientific director or possibly a. And so sort of what you do in your postdoc or in your PhD might set you up differently for those things. You know, for the scientist route, of course, skill matching is important. But for more of the leadership route, you know, having mentees and having these things like writing grants, writing reports, general communication and things like that is going to be helpful for those kinds of things. You can think of it kind of like an academic lab leader, but you know, with all of the differences in industry sort of layered into that. And so you can definitely think about beyond the specific technical skills that you can learn in a postdoc position, what sort of soft skills you can learn that would be helpful in this way. And I would concur that communication and skills are like super, super important. Okay.
Oh, I was gonna make two comments. One is that I agree with the soft skills, also the networking. So if you are interested in going to industry, maybe do a postdoc with a PI that collaborates with industry, might make it easier. But I wanted to make another comment. I don't know how many of the grad students attending these are international students, but I did wanted to make a comment that I'll say that the cost for an international to do a postdoc and then go to industry is bigger than for a citizen, because you are eating up your STEM OPT and it's very hard to get a job after that for them to sponsor you directly with the H-1B. So to consider that as well.
Yeah, that's a great point, Elena, thank you. Okay, can I have one or two people comment on what the interview process is like? I think this is fairly standard for academic positions, but maybe I can ask one of the academic postdocs to comment on that, and then Elena to comment on what the interview process is like for the national lab. Yeah.
Alan did it most recently, right? So can we pick on him?
Yeah. You do it, Alan.
Sure. For me, it was some email exchange initially. I actually got email first from the professor that I talked to at the conference, and he was asking like, are you still interested in finding a postdoc? And I said, yeah. And then we basically set up an informal Zoom conversation to basically talk about different projects that are available in the lab, and to find out which of the projects that I'm really interested in to kind of gauge my interest. And then they invite me on site for like a seminar in front of the lab, and also have like an individual meeting with the PI. So I did that process for 3 different labs, and it was pretty much the same for all of them. So they provide you all the costs associated with the invitation for the on-site talk. And I get to talk with the lab members individually as well. So they usually set aside a time for either one-on-one meeting with lab members or like 2-to-1 meetings. So I really enjoyed having that because even if you don't, like, I obviously had to choose one out of those 3 that I was invited, but I actually get to meet like all the lab members in the process, and basically, you know, making friends or making networks out of that. So that was pretty much the process that I went through for interview process.
So I think for the national lab, it's relatively similar, except that, again, it's not so much that you are applying for like a specific lab, but rather to a specific project. So I originally have like a 30-minute informal conversation with the project manager. That is not my PI, it's a different person. And after that, you have like a 1 day, it's usually an on-site visit, but again, I was interviewing during COVID, so mine was virtual. And then you meet with potentially the person that you are gonna be mentored by, so your PI, with the project managers of the group, and then with other team members of that project as well, to see how well that you know, the collaborations will be between them. And usually you have like a lunch. I didn't have that. I just had like a small breakout room with the other postdocs, and then another one with the technical professionals as well.
Perfect, thanks guys. So now for the final question before we open the floor for Q&A. Can we get some comments on people's experiences with fellowship applications? This can be different for international versus like citizens of the US. And so if you can highlight some differences there too. I'm in Canada, so I will mention that last, which is interesting.
So I'm an international as well, and I did look up some opportunities, and it looks like a lot of national fellowship like NSF or NIH are only for US citizens or permanent residents. So I was not, you know, not eligible to apply for those. There are also institutional fellowships. For example, my research is in energy and sustainability, and universities like Stanford and Princeton have distinguished or like specific fellowships for energy and sustainability postdocs. And you can actually apply like you're applying for NSF or NIH fellowship. Like you have your research plan, and you need to have like an advisor from the institution that could advise you on that specific research goal. And I think the biggest advantage is you having a flexibility on what research you want to pursue. And as long as you have that, money with you, your PI can easily take you to his or her lab. So that's, I think, the biggest advantages. But you need to, one thing you need to keep an eye on is the deadline for all of those. So I did look up quickly for the Stanford sustainability one, and it looks like it's open, and it's open until I think October 1st or July, or yes, October 1st. So if you're interested in, I think now is a good time to really apply for those fellowships.
I can talk about some of the NIH funding. And I also will say, typically within an institution, there's small seed grants that you can apply for. They're not necessarily for you. They can fund you as a person, and you're only competing against other people at your institution. So like at Northwestern, we have like the chemistry life processes group and whatever, and like they'll give out like small grants. And so that's how my funding started as a postdoc. And then for NIH funding, so for postdoctoral fellowships, there's an F32. That one is limited. You have to be a US citizen to apply for that, but I got one of those second year, my third year, sometime earlier in my postdoc. And it funds you as a person. It also gives you a very small budget for like buying supplies. I think you get like $11,000 a year for like supplies and professional development, which is nice. It can fund like all your conference travel, things like that. And then the other big NIH postdoc fellowship is a K99R00. That one is not limited to US citizens. It's a transition to independence grant. And so it would fund you for 1 to 2 years as a postdoc and then 3 years as an independent faculty member. The underlying thing is like you have to stay in the US to do the R00 phase. They're not going to send the NIH money abroad for a faculty position. And so I just got one of those last month. And it's really great because it gives you a lot of leverage when you're applying on the faculty market as well. I think the biggest piece of advice I would give you for applying for those is find other people's applications, like ask people to see their applications, because so much of it is like formulaic, and like the people who are reading these in study sections, they want to know, they're going to see what they need to see, where they expect to see it in the application. So if you can find other people's successful applications and kind of like structure yours to be exactly the same, that is super duper helpful for just readability of the study section people who are grading it, to be able to read them and judge them. For F32s, there's also a book that's on like writing a successful Ruth Kirstein F32 NRSA. I can't remember the title, but it's really helpful and it really runs through every single section and what you have to put inside of it. I will also say I'm happy if people want to email me, I'm happy to share my application packets with people. Just don't like post them on the internet or anything like that.
Thanks, Kat. I'll add one thing for these postdocs is that the K99 you can't do even if you're a US citizen when you're abroad, but the F32 you can do as a US citizen living abroad, although you do have to justify in it why you're not in the US and why they should send money to you there. Yes, I say that as somebody who's in Canada. Another thing that I'll recommend is to look at state or province specific funding sources. So for example, in British Columbia, there's this Michael Smith Foundation for Health Research that has fellowships that have a relatively high success rate, and that's one that I have. In like the state of Washington, where I'm originally from, there's the Washington Research Foundation postdoctoral fellowship grants. And so look at the national scene, but then also look in the state or whatever that you're going to be working in to see if they have sort of local funding as well.
I can just comment briefly on maybe like private foundation fellowships, because I'm funded by the Damon Runyon Cancer Foundation. And I think I was just looking at my list. Some other stuff that I thought about applying to was like Helen Hay Whitney or the Hannah Gray Fellows at HHMI. So they're all a little bit different, and they have like I guess a particular mission-driven focus. And Damon Runyon is sort of interesting because they primarily fund cancer research, but I sort of noticed when I looked at the website and looked at past awardees that there was always a couple of microbiology people mixed in, maybe because cancer patients are immunocompromised and like susceptible to antibiotic resistance infection. So like there were like antibiotic resistance people getting funded. So maybe like the short piece of advice there is like, don't count yourself out maybe for something that sounds specific. And also maybe like something better than the description can be looking at who has won these sort of things in the past to see if you might also be eligible. Also the Hannah Gray, let me just check. Yeah, I think the Hannah Gray Fellows at HHMI is also diversity focused, which is another, if you sort of fall in that category of one of these groups that they consider a minority, you can apply for that. And I think it's really excellent. So there's lots of paths in. And I would just echo what Kat said. Like one of the first things I did was email people I knew who had applied and been successful. And I think what surprised me is I really thought that the application was largely going to be about the research statement, which was true. That was like the centerpiece, but there are lots of other little pieces. I think the thing that surprised me is a lot of getting it done is just keeping track of what are all these little pieces. What does my PI have to do and how do I keep them on timeline? And then maybe also just like how to write the cover letter, for instance, like what's the level of detail that's appropriate? How much do I talk about? How do I talk about what I did in my PhD versus balancing that with what I want to do in the future? So I think there are like some subtle things you learn even from these like accessory documents.
Just like Alan, I'm international. I will say there weren't many opportunities to apply for anything as an international, and I think it's even worse for national labs. I think there are absolutely like zero that you can apply. But the good thing about the national lab is that even, I mean, if they are posting like a position for a postdoc, it means that they are prepared to be fully funded the whole time that you're going to be here as a postdoc, and national labs pay better. So apply. I'm gonna put the link in my of my division as well, because we are looking for people.
Great, awesome. So thanks everyone. Now, if you in the audience have a burning question, feel free to open up your mic or put it into the chat, and then we will answer. And if you guys are slow, then I'm going to answer questions from the forum. But you guys are all smart, brilliant grad students that can open your mic and ask questions, right? Not unlike the undergrads that join these webinars sometimes and don't ask questions.
I'll ask a question, although I just saw that Casey also raised her hand. One thing is like, as you enter a PhD, you think you know so much about what you want and what you're looking for in a lab. And then by the end, you're like, oh shoot, like if I could go back to the beginning and do that again, like I'd make a lot of different decisions. So I'm sure there's a similar learning experience during a postdoc. And I'm curious if there's anything you thought you were looking for needed going into a postdoc. And it turns out later on, you're like, oh shoot, actually, this is something I didn't really consider that I was actually would have been important in that decision. Or do you all feel pretty good about your choices?
I'll say I feel really good about my choice. I think the one thing that I had to learn along the way relating to applying for funding, it is really helpful when you're applying for an NIH grant to have PI with a history of NIH funding, which my PI does not.
Yeah,
and so totally. The way you get around that is you find like a co-PI. And so I have, for every grant I've submitted, I've had a co-mentor who's someone with like a much richer history of NIH funding, and that's worked. So just find other people to add on to your grants.
You can go ahead, Heidi.
Oh, sorry, Ross. I also am happy with my choice, but I think something that I hadn't thought about was maybe checking how many postdocs the lab has had before and where did they go, maybe as a way to sort of assess how things are. I just didn't think about it till I showed up because I was like, oh, I like papers, science is cool. The other thing is maybe having more kind of conversations about who might train me, or seeing if there's like excitement about that. Because one thing that kind of surprised me in the transition is showing up as a postdoc, particularly if you like maybe want to do a very independent project. It's like, I think people expect, or I don't know, I think I've just noticed that like my grad student mentee, it is much easier for her to like plug into stuff and people want to train her. Whereas I feel like when I showed up as a postdoc, people were like, oh, you don't know how to do this. So yeah, I think having some discussion about like, how does this work? So yeah.
That makes sense, yeah.
I'll add one thing, which is that if you're thinking about doing something like a startup, even now, or maybe out of your postdoc, there's some like pretty particular things that are involved in that. And as early as you can, like find people at your university or that your like PI would have contacts with that you can like start having conversations with about like, doing IP searches and stuff like that. And there's university resources for these kinds of things, but like I've talked to some people here at the university, for example, learned about some of the recommendations. And I think that there's a different orientation to how you do your postdoc if you want to sort of move in that direction. And so this isn't necessarily something that I'm trying to do right now. It's just like something I've learned along the way and might be relevant for anybody that's thinking about using their postdoc as sort of like a, I don't know, like a initial stage of a startup, basically. There's a lot to that beyond just doing the science. That's pretty different than what you would do for an academic position. Okay, I think Casey had her hand up, and then we'll go to Quan Hui.
Yeah, I guess my question is, what is the most stressful part of your postdoc, and how do you like manage or mitigate those stressors?
I guess I can start. So since I'm kind of new, and I'm basically the biggest challenge, the biggest change I've had from my PhD research to postdoc is dealing with a different organism. So I mainly work with E. coli for my PhD, and now I'm working with yeast. And it's generally the experiments that I work with isn't the same. And, you know, like by the time you finish your PhD, I think you're like the most efficient person. So you basically can streamline every experiment, and things go as planned in general. Whereas when you start in the new location, new lab environment, and new technique, things usually don't go as planned. And past month or so, I've been pretty stressed out because of that. And I feel like I have more responsibility for being a postdoc than when I was a graduate student. So I've talked to several people about this, and what people are telling me is just to kind of relax, I mean, even though there are a bit more expectation and responsibility, but it's not like they want me to get results like as soon as I start working. So I think, yeah, just get more relaxed and kind of go step by step was the advice that I got. So I'm kind of slowly settling into doing that, and hopefully that's going to work for me.
I think a stress that you'll have as a postdoc, similar to like a late stage graduate student, is that if the lab, especially if it has a lot of like grad students, undergrads, like you'll get a lot of people coming to you, hopefully like asking you questions, which is nice to be helpful, but it can also just add a lot on to what you're trying to do. And so it'll just like expand the amount of time that you're spending like working overall, right? Sort of informal and formal mentorship. And so there's usually more of an expectation for you to do these kinds of things and to maybe have some formal mentorship for graduate students and undergrads in the lab than you might have had when you were a grad student. And so learning to sort of do all of your experiments and to do them as fast as and as well as you can, because you know you're like expected to be sort of somewhat of a research leader in the lab, hopefully. And then also like help out with mentorship of a lot of the people in the lab can lead to just some added like time stress basically. And so that's something to like be aware of and will be sort of variable over time. You'll be more likely to have a PI like suddenly have a grant due and then watch your input or feedback or work on it and things like that. And some of this can come up at unideal times. And I think there's the perpetual stress of being like, you know, ideally, once you're done with the postdoc, you're getting your like real job, right? So whether that's going into academia and all the stress of getting ready for that, and like when should I apply, like when do I have enough data, all those things, which we can talk about more. Or if you're going into like industry, thinking about how long is the right amount of time to be in your postdoc and so on. When have you learned enough? Are you going to be leaving the lab behind, like hanging and so on? How do you like set things up so that if you're leaving a project that it can continue on? I think that all of these sorts of things can kind of build up and be stressful. And I don't know what helps besides, to me, it helps to talk to other postdocs and reminisce on the stress, I guess. But yeah.
Yeah, I just agree with you all. I think that the one that has been the most difficult for one for me has been like Alan, like expecting to be as efficient, as productive as I was as the last part of my PhD, as I am starting this new project, which is unrealistic, right? So you suffer this imposter syndrome, like, oh my God, did I ever learn anything in my, PhD? Like, why can I not know this thing? No, just joking, but it's true. So just give yourself some time to get used to the new techniques, to the new organisms that you're studying, and just be patient. Yeah.
All right, Kwan Hui, did you have a question?
Oh yeah. Hi everyone. I'm Chong Hui, a graduate student at UIUC. My situation is a bit different. So I'm doing environmental engineering, but I'm using the synthetic biology techniques, engineering protein and enzymes for environmental application. So the big challenge for me is how to make the connection with professors working in synthetic biology area, because those professors are mainly from chemical engineering or bioengineering, and the conference I went to mainly related to environmental engineering. So I would like to hear some suggestions if you have. And also for the postdoc, where to find the openings. Thank you.
So I guess I can answer the first one because I did like a very interdisciplinary research between soil sciences and synthetic biology. So I wanted to use synthetic biology and apply them for soil sciences. And sometimes it was kind of hard to bridge the gap when I needed to talk with geologists that didn't even know anything about, the central dogma of biology, and then vice versa. When I was trying to talk about different, soil horizons and different mineralogy to synthetic biologists that were like working on a flask. So I will say for me, the most important thing is work on your communication skills. Try to, forget about the jargon and everything that you learned during your environmental engineering aspects and try to reach that gap with the synthetic biologist, and also attend conferences in both fields. So that was really helpful for me. I went to geology conferences where like half of the talks were about fossils, and I was just like, oh my God, what am I doing here? But I got to meet some people and make connections that way. And on the other hand, I went to synthetic biology conferences that were, people making like these big, gene circuits and things like that. And I was interested in making my bacteria in the soil. So I think it's important to go to both of them.
Okay, a question by Ice. And this is perhaps a stressful question to answer, which is, do you have a plan in mind for how long your postdoc training would be? And then based on our experience, does it usually go to plan?
I think as the most senior postdoc on the panel, I can say, no, it did not go to plan. I had this grand vision of like a 2-year postdoc, and now like 4 years later, no. And I think that's okay. Like I was able to get a lot of research done. And I think, for going on the faculty market last year, no one was like, oh my gosh, why have you been a postdoc for 4 years? It was like, look at the wealth of research that you've done and the research you're proposing. So I don't think it's a race. It's some people do it really fast, some people do it slower, and that's okay. Everyone goes at their own pace. But no, things do not always go to plan when you're a postdoc, and that's okay.
I think one best way to kind of keep, be on control of how long you do postdoc is basically getting a job offer before you're starting your postdoc. I've seen quite a few people who apply right after PhD and get an academic job offer, and either the institution requires you to do a couple of years of postdoc, or they defer the starting and go to postdoc. And usually in those cases, you have freedom of limiting your postdoc to like 1 or 2 years. But if you're like looking for a job while doing postdoc, I think it's a little more challenging, and it really depends on the job market. Whether there are a lot of openings in your specific research area is also very challenging. So I think you need to consider all of those things.
Great, thanks, guys. And then, Elena, do you have something too?
No, I wanted to make the positive note to say that sometimes it can go according to plan, and that happened to me. I do think it can it's just being lucky a little bit, like Alan was saying, like looking for a position that is like the fit for you. Like I was lucky that DOE put a call for like a big science focus area that was very related to my research. So I'm actually about to finish my PhD and start a new position in October. But so I did a 2-year postdoc. But again, it depends on luck, and try to look for your own niche. If you are looking for a position in national lab or in academia, something that it's different, something that will complement the team that it's already at that institution.
Okay, thanks. So in terms of when you're onboarded, there's some questions about this, especially if you're transitioning to a new field. What does this sort of expectation look like there? Do you have time to like learn and train, or are you expected to like be doing experiments immediately? And I have a couple of comments on this, but I can let you guys go first. Or I can just add my comments first. So, okay, in both of my like grad school experience, seeing postdocs coming in and also being a postdoc now, there's generally been plenty of time for a postdoc to get into the lab, get oriented, learn from other postdocs or even grad students in the lab. Like when I was a grad student, I would train postdocs frequently on random stuff. So that's okay. And that's a good time to basically be like reading a lot and working on fellowship applications. And it's not often the case that a postdoc will like get into the lab like week one sort of thing. I mean, notwithstanding the time it always takes to get your like biohazard safety tracing and all that stuff worked out, which, you know, if you remember from grad school, maybe you don't because it just happened while you were like getting set up with like classes and stuff. But, you know, always takes a while. And so most PIs will give you a good amount of time to like really think through what you want to do, write your applications or get started on fellowship applications, at least get some training from other people and then start going in. You shouldn't feel like, hopefully you shouldn't feel rushed to like immediately start producing data, because at least in my opinion, you should really think about a project before you dive into it fully, especially if you're going to be doing it for 2 to 3 years or more.
Yeah, I think I would maybe add, or like that. I think, yeah, a lot of it kind of depends maybe on luck and like varies between person to person. Because I think, yeah, there's like an aspect to which it's like protected time in a way where you're like not worrying about maybe like applying for funding to keep the lab going so you can explore new stuff. So taking advantage of that time, like other people have said, is useful. I think also like some people join the lab and then sort of immediately start contributing to another project, which can also be a nice way to, I guess, like maybe get some productivity and training sort of at the same time. I think also projects just like vary in their like maybe degree of like concreteness and like how quickly everything is working. And so yeah, it kind of depends on like where you are in the lab, like when you join the lab. But like I think all of these things are good. But I just remember coming to one of my mentors and being like, oh, like so and so joined the lab at the same time I did, and he's already doing all these things. And like, well, you know, if you join a project that works, sometimes that happens. Some people come in with like a strong sense of what they wanted to do, and you know, you're sort of here to figure out what you want to do. So that's also fine.
Yeah, I think the only thing I'd say, and I'd put this somewhere in the chat as well, but like your priority shouldn't be just getting in and generate data right away. Like if you don't have a good grasp on like what the project is and how you're going to do it well, the data you generate right away is probably going to be crap and you're not going to use it in a paper anyway. Like you need to know why you're doing what you're doing. You need to know how to do what you're doing well. And so taking that time to make sure you have that foundation laid is going to save you time in the end. And any PI worth their salt also knows that and is going to want you to have that foundation before you start doing like experiments and lots of things.
Any final comments, guys, before we end the recording, and then we can go into breakout rooms to socialize, network, ask more Q&A in a smaller setting to the panelists?
I maybe have like a silly comment, which is one way in which the postdoc is less stressful than grad school is you can leave at any time that it suits you. So I don't know. I feel like I have a lot more kind of control and agency in my career, which maybe is like unique because I'm a citizen and all these other things. But I do think it's a little better than grad school that if you stop you have something to show for it in terms of your years of postdoc experience, which can still count for it.
All right, perfect. Thanks, Heidi. That's a great final point. You have a bit more leverage than a graduate student, so it's a good thing to remember in that way. You don't have to produce a thesis at the end. Okay, so thanks again to the panelists and to those of you that joined. This meeting is going to be posted on our YouTube channel. So if you're interested to go back and watch, it should be there hopefully in the next week or two. It's been produced by the Engineering Biology Research Consortium Student and Postdoc Association. For more information about EBRC, visit our website at ebrc.org. If you're a graduate student or a postdoc and want to get involved in the Student and Postdoc Association, we put a link in the chat. You can put one again for those of you sticking around. And a big thank you to the rest of the EBRC SPA outreach leaders, which include Ava Karangia, Ice Cholpisset, Kelsey Gray, Yan Zhang, and Koxi Lee, and along with the many SPA members that have assisted in our efforts here and in other workshops and panels that we have produced. So thanks to the rest of EBRC for our support and especially supporting our outreach initiatives. And we look forward to our next events soon. And stop.